This is your City Council Roundup, a recap of what's happening at City Hall with John Ongaro. The views expressed in this program are solely of those of the host and not necessarily those of the radio station or its partners.
Well, the second City Council meeting under the new format underway last night at 6:41 with a large choir opening the night with O Canada. That was nice to see. It's a nice addition to these council meetings, especially when we knew what was coming next. Last night, there were 12 councillors present. Councillor Greg Johnson, the only one not in chambers last night. That makes 12, not 13. You see where we're going?
Yes.
So let's get into it. You'll remember it all started back in July with a backdoor forced hand flip decision on a temporary village going to a dog park off of Central Avenue. That's summarized. That's what happened. And here we are in mid-September with a motion to change their mind on a plan that should never have been voted in the first place. Tensions were high last night. The drama was high. You could feel it just watching it. And it all started with a couple of memos from both the city manager and from the city clerk, Krista Power. Both were designed to give councillors a roadmap of the night, how we got here, where we go, and most importantly, the procedural bylaws that govern the evening, meaning how this is going to play out. Let's first break down the memo from the city manager so that you can understand how it was laid out to council. It was very specific. I'm not going to read the multiple pages to you, but it's where we are right now and how their decision last night will make everything else happen. Everything else hinges on last night's decision. The city manager told councillors last night that the backlash on the Hillyard site centers around 5 key areas: a lack of public consultation prior to the decision, and concerns about potential increases in crime, vagrancy, and tent encampments, which some businesses fear could halt commercial investment in the area. Let me read that part again. Could halt commercial investment in the area. While the city manager's memo states that there are no significant barriers to the site, Hillyard, it acknowledges that the area businesses and residents are very concerned. You don't say. They all are. The memo warns that even if the location is reapproved, this delay means partial occupancy is now unlikely until 2026. If council rescinds the decision last night, selecting a new site would take at least 60 days, etc., etc. The memo concludes that the temporary village is an essential component of the city's 10-part plan to address homelessness, and that canceling it without an alternative would require rewriting the plan and essentially maintaining the status quo. So away we went with the motion on the floor last night at 7:03. The notice of motion. The first motion to rescind on the table requires a 2/3 vote. Listen carefully. There are 9 members required to rescind Hillyard. With that, they were able to use 3 rounds of debates, with councillors getting a max of 10 minutes each. Councillor Gatuga was first up, and he talked at length about the loss of the process and how we got to last night. And I will say this, it might be breaking news. This is the first time that I've agreed with him. Councillor Gatuga was right last night. He called out councillors for flip-flopping. He was right. Not sure if the councillor will mention that him and I agree, but on this one we should. And way to go, councillor. You did have it right, because the entire process has been embarrassing. He went on to explain that they blew the process weeks ago, and instead of having a majority vote, 7 votes to get things through, they're now forced to come up with 9. And that's difficult. But then he continued into a debate about the number of people in the room. 2/3 of 13 is 9. But Gertuga questioned the clerk by reading the bylaws and procedures back to the clerk, and that debate went on with Councillor Agarwal also arguing that the math is wrong and that the law clearly states that the total is based on eligible voting members. She was cut off by the speaker, and the clerk confirmed in a long-winded answer, this is just how it is. There is nothing different. So that's the rules. 2/3 vote to come up. That came up again later on when Councillor Gertuga again challenged the clerk on the verbiage in the procedural bylaw and the voting totals. Now, at this point, I couldn't figure out why we had 2 councillors going back and forth with the clerk on this. Of all people, not the clerk. The clerk knows these laws like the back of her hand. And then it dawned on me. The law says 9 votes makes 2/3 of the vote. But there was someone missing last night. So the 2/3 vote would mean that there needs to be 8 members to rescind, right? No. It was explained clearly by the clerk last night. As it said, the law requires 2/3 of eligible voting members, which is 13. Even though one wasn't there, you still required 2/3. That's when the light bulb went off. They needed 9. And my count said they've only got 8 to rescind. So this is where things started to turn. Councillor Agarwal was one of the councillors in support of the dog park when it was snuck into that meeting a month ago. After all the other selections, including Miles Street, failed, you may remember she talked at great length about people being one with nature in a natural setting for healing. Well, last night did a complete 180. All of a sudden, it isn't right for the businesses. It isn't a good location. The transportation costs. So that was the first flip of the night. And that opened the floodgates. Multiple councillors were changing their mind, and it started to look like the Hillyard site would be rescinded. One by one, councillors said their piece again and again and again. All of these things we've heard before, but many of them starting to concede to the fact that the pressure from business was too great, that we should be focused on growth. And by halting business and growth in the area, we're doing the wrong thing. It's what we have to do, but the space isn't right. Councillor Bentz, who is the biggest proponent to the Hillyard site, he jumped in and started his, speeches with what happens with a reversal, what happens next, and kept saying that, yes, it's something that we absolutely needed, and no, we didn't backdoor it. It was on the site, and it was 73% of the total grades, and so how come we didn't pick places that were 67? It became a bit of a disaster. Back and forth we went again. Round 2 came. Then round 3 came. All of them saying the same thing. Now, I am going to, again, go out on a limb here and say that there was somebody else that I was very happy spoke up last night. Although extremely frustrated, Councillor Chung did something I thought was very smart, which this morning, when I'm reading through social media, many didn't agree with. But she noted, we've done this before. There is such a thing in our procedural bylaws called suspension of the rules. And that's when the floodgates opened about Miles Street again. Can we bring back Miles Street? The answer is yes. It would require another notice of motion. However, the notice of motion in front of them last night was on Hillyard. So you can't have two at the same time. But Councillor Chung suggested, can we not suspend the rules right now to hit the brakes on this and talk about Miles Street again? The answer was no. You have a notice of motion in front of you about Hillyard. You've got to stick to that. The rules are complicated, but that was the first light that I saw, that there were a couple of councillors that are willing to revote the Miles Street location, which, in this broadcaster's humble opinion, is the right place to be. But that quickly was stomped on by Mark Bentz, who very proudly proclaimed that there's no way Miles Street's coming back because look around, we just don't have the votes. He's probably right. But the whole motion last night was to rescind the Hillyard's lot, the dog park, if you will. You may remember that yesterday on this program, I kind of gave you a little bit of a tip-off on who might be in the gallery last night. In council chambers last night was probably the greatest gathering of the most successful business owners in our community. No, they were not there to bully councillors. No, they were not there to strong-arm them into a decision. They were there to say, we're paying attention. And I will go on a limb and say they're not paying attention to the votes. They're paying attention to the disaster that this council has become. To let them know that the business community is trying their best to jump on a growth train that this group continues to derail. Here we are again with a bunch of business owners, prominent business owners, who have significant investment in our community that can do amazing things in growth for our community, that is saying to your city council, this is not the place for it. You broke the rules. There was no public consultation. We did not get the same opportunity to speak to the matter like the Fort William BIA did, and you're pushing it through anyway. That's why they were there. And so it was on to the vote to rescind whether or not to move forward on the Hillyard site. Well, I was stuck on the math before this vote.
There was a few back and forths I remember about.
Because then it started with, if we say no to this and we rescind the motion, can Hillyard ever come back? The answer, no. If we say no to this, can we bring back Miles Street? The answer, yes, but would require another notice of motion. That's when it got confusing, and that's when the drama got high. The final vote in chambers last night on the notice of motion to rescind Hillyard. In English, to cancel it, to skip it. The notice of motion, final vote to rescind. The noes, not to rescind, Mark Bentz, Shelby Chung, Casey Atrini, and Kristen Oliver. Ken Boschka, Aiello, Agarwal, Hamilton, Gertuga, Pascalino, Cezzino, and Folds all said yes to rescind. The math is 8, not 9. That's all that mattered. Hillyard is now confirmed, and it moves forward. It was at that point, when that vote came in, that every prominent business person in that gallery stood up together and walked out the door in shame. They are shameful. What had happened last night was shameful. You have business leaders in the room saying to you, please don't do this. We're trying to give you an out. The notice of motion was your out for this location that was not even discussed in the community. That did. And there were counselors last night who constantly said, well, we've had a couple of weeks to deliberate. No, you haven't. There have been no deputations from these business owners. There have been no deputations about why a dog park in the center of town, completely removed from any services, was a good idea. There were no deliberations on how it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in transportation costs to get people to this new temporary village. Nobody had a chance to talk about that. No wonder the business owners were disgusted and walked out like they did. What happens next? The fallout will begin. These business owners have no intention of moving anything forward because it's apparent that this city council cannot get it together. Councillor Folds, the speaker last night, did make a comment last night that kind of perked my ears up because he said a lot of the commentary in the community was about how this council is having a difficult time making a decision. You don't say, Counselor. Last night was another prime example of a completely divided council that can't decide if they're coming or going. But here's the thing. It was confirmed last night that Hillyard won't start now and won't be occupied until the spring. In the spring, in May, is when the election campaigning starts. Next year is an election year. Watch this space. Find out who is going to change their mind and fall into pressure from the community or the business community and maybe change their mind again. I don't see any way that anything is going to change at this point. Hillyard is confirmed. It's moving forward, and it's going to start getting built around election time. This council needs to go. All of them. We need to start over. We need to start over with people who can make difficult decisions, but most importantly, we need to start over with a group of people that get along. Let the fallout begin. The meeting was over at 9:37 last night.
One thing that stood out to me was Councillor Zucchino. At one point, he had said, hey, listen, a lot of people didn't even know what the Hillyard site was until this was suggested and or came up.
Yeah.
John, I've lived here all my life, and
You
I know
didn't know
these
where it
dog parks are out there and this and that. Didn't even know where Hillyard was.
No, I've never taken my dog to a dog park, so I didn't know it was there either.
Right.
It was a shock.
When you do a Google map, an aerial shot of that, to think where that is going to go,
yeah,
I can't wrap my head around it, John, just like
it
a
makes
lot
no
of people.
sense.
I can't wrap my head around this.
It actually makes no sense. But you know what? Here's the thing, Danny, and we've been talking about this for months, literally for months. It doesn't matter now. It's approved. It's done. There is no fight now. It's finally over. I will tell you that I've heard from counselors specifically who have stressed to me how unbelievably difficult this has been.
Yeah.
It has completely consumed their time with the amount of fallout that there has been and the amount of work that has gone into this. That's enough now. It's done. But isn't it interesting that last night I'm online watching the commentary, because there were a lot of people watching that meeting last night. There are still a lot of people that do not completely understand what's happening, that think that this is going to solve all problems. It's not. And the one misconception that I have to explain again, and especially now that they have made their final decision on Hillyard, the idea of designated encampment sites that everybody's excited about, we're going to shut them down and we're going to move them out of... No. None of that is going to happen until this place is built. Then we still have to go through the process of these 13 people deciding on the appropriate encampment sites. They can't pick a place for the temporary village. Imagine these 13 people being the ones in charge of picking where people can set up their tents. The tents aren't going away. You are another year or more away from that even happening. And at the same time, all of the people in Fort William that were concerned about the temporary village going on Miles Street, the tent encampment, the largest one that is right in the heart of the downtown, is probably going to stay there now, because these people are not moving to a dog park.
When this meeting started just after 6:30, I got excited. I'm doing a scope of all the I said, I think everybody's there. But one counselor was not there. But it would be interesting to know...
I'm going to guess he would have. I'm going to guess he would have voted. He would have voted to rescind it.
Okay, so
that's my guess. I don't know that. I've never had a conversation with him, but that's my guess.
Say that was the decision.
We'd be starting all over again.
Right, but this is what I referred to 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but this is the point, Danny. And this is a great conversation, because this is the stuff that was happening online yesterday. Great. Yeah, well, now we're starting all over again. Yeah, but it's not getting built this year anyway now. Right? It doesn't matter now because you can't put shovels in the ground in November.
No, you can't.
It doesn't work that way. So it's not happening till spring anyway. It would have been the smart thing to do to say, we blew it. We ran out of time. Hit the brakes. Let's use the winter to start figuring this out again and try again in the spring. That's not what happened last night.
No. John, my concern is, I said this 2 weeks ago, I'm going to say it again. My concern is on decisions of this magnitude. All counselors need to be there. One is missing for whatever reason, we don't know.
It could have been a long planned reason for not being there.
I get it,
but at the same time,
changed it.
But to Councillor Johnson's defense, he had no idea. If he would have booked something months ago,
100%.
He would have no idea that this would still be going on in September. It's not his fault. But that one vote would have made a difference if he would have voted to rescind.
But look what it now creates, a domino effect.
Yeah,
of maybe businesses that are going to do this or that.
I completely agree. But back up the bus. It was only a few weeks ago, month or so ago, where Miles Street was there and the mayor was the tie vote.
Yeah.
And the mayor changed his mind on the vote and said no to Miles Street. That's how we got here. So we can pick that apart till the cows come home. It doesn't matter. The point is that we voted for 13 members. 13 members are not agreeing.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get 13 members around the table for whatever reason. And here we are on a file that's been going on for 2 years, but it's over now. It's done. There is no conversation about this anymore. It's going to happen. But what the conversation will now turn to is it's going to happen, but at what loss?
Right.
Where are we going to lose
Yeah,
in
100%.
investments in the city?
Yeah.
Where are we going to lose when these business owners say, yeah, I'm not interested in playing with this council. We're out. Or we're out until the next term.
Could you
Next
imagine?
year is an election year. It's very, very, very important.
How I'd love to have been a fly on the wall after those business owners left that meeting and just behind city council, even today, what a day it's going to be.
You could feel their disgust as they walked out.
Yeah.
And these are prominent people doing good things for the community every single day that are getting together to say, please just follow the process. Please stick to something. Let's just make a decision. But this isn't right. And nobody listened. Well, I shouldn't say that. Many of them didn't listen.
Yeah.
And they're doing it anyway. So it was approved. We'll meet again in a couple of weeks, not about the village.
All right, John, thanks for your thoughts, your input. That has been your City Council Roundup. Another reminder, you can find the full roundup at yourthunderbay.ca, and you'll find that on our website. There it is.